Many companies have policies regarding whether their employees should pull over for funerals. These policies vary depending on the company's culture, size, industry, and location. Some common policies include: firstly, mandatory, where all employees must pull over for funerals; secondly, optional, where employees have the discretion to decide whether to pull over or not; thirdly, case by case, where the decision is made on a case-by-case basis, considering factors such as traffic and safety; and fourthly, lawful, where employees must comply with state laws that require pulling over for funerals. Most states have laws that require drivers to yield to funeral processions. These laws vary in terms of the definition of a funeral procession, the actions drivers must take, and the penalties for violating the law. Beyond legal requirements, pulling over for funerals is a matter of respect and sensitivity. It shows that the company and its employees care about the community and are mindful of the grieving families. The company's culture plays a role in determining the policy on pulling over for funerals. In companies that emphasize community involvement and respect, pulling over is likely to be seen as an important way to demonstrate those values. There may be practical considerations that affect whether employees pull over. For example, if an employee is driving on a highway with heavy traffic, it may be unsafe to pull over. In such cases, the company may have a policy that exempts employees from pulling over. Whether employees should pull over for funerals is a matter that each company must decide for itself. Legal requirements, company culture, and practical considerations should all be taken into account when establishing a policy. When determining a policy, one should consider the legal obligations within the state or region of operation. This involves researching the specific laws regarding funeral processions, yielding requirements, and potential penalties for non-compliance. Secondly, assess the company's culture and values. If the company places a strong emphasis on community involvement, respect, and empathy, a policy that encourages pulling over for funeral processions may align well with these values. Thirdly, evaluate potential practical considerations that may affect the implementation of a policy. These could include factors such as traffic conditions, employee safety, and the nature of the employee's job responsibilities. This evaluation will help determine whether exceptions or modifications to the policy are necessary. Fourthly, consider different policy options such as mandatory compliance, optional compliance, or a case-by-case approach. Each option has its own advantages and disadvantages, and the best choice will depend on the specific circumstances of the company. Fifthly, communicate the policy clearly and effectively to all employees. This should include providing training on the legal requirements, the company's values, and the practical considerations that may affect the policy. Sixthly, monitor and enforce the policy consistently. This will help ensure that employees are aware of the policy and that it is being followed. Lastly, review and update the policy periodically to ensure that it remains relevant and effective. This should include considering any changes in the law, the company's culture, or the practical considerations that may affect the policy. In summary, establishing a comprehensive policy on pulling over for funeral processions involves careful consideration of legal requirements, company culture, practical considerations, and effective communication. In addition to the aforementioned points, there are several other factors that companies should consider when establishing a policy on pulling over for funeral processions. Firstly, it is important to define what constitutes a funeral procession. This definition should be clear and concise, and it should be consistent with the legal definition in the relevant jurisdiction. For example, a funeral procession may be defined as a group of vehicles traveling together to a funeral or memorial service, with the lead vehicle displaying a flag or other identifier. Secondly, companies should consider the safety implications of pulling over for funeral processions. In some cases, it may be unsafe to pull over, such as on a busy highway or in inclement weather. In these situations, employees should be instructed to exercise caution and to prioritize their own safety and the safety of others. Thirdly, companies should consider the potential impact on their operations. If a significant number of employees are required to pull over for funeral processions, this could lead to delays or disruptions in service. Companies should develop strategies to mitigate these potential impacts, such as by adjusting employee schedules or by providing alternative transportation options. Fourthly, companies should consider the potential liability implications of their policy. If an employee is involved in an accident while pulling over for a funeral procession, the company could be held liable. Companies should ensure that their insurance coverage is adequate to cover these potential liabilities. Fifthly, companies should consider the ethical implications of their policy. Some people believe that it is always respectful to pull over for funeral processions, while others believe that it is a matter of personal choice. Companies should carefully consider these different perspectives when developing their policy. Sixthly, companies should consider the impact of their policy on employee morale. If employees feel that the policy is unfair or unreasonable, this could lead to resentment or dissatisfaction. Companies should solicit employee feedback when developing their policy, and they should be willing to make adjustments as needed. Seventhly, companies should consider the potential for public relations benefits. A company that has a policy of pulling over for funeral processions may be seen as being more caring and compassionate. This could lead to improved public image and increased customer loyalty. Eighthly, companies should consider the long-term implications of their policy. A policy that is effective in the short term may not be sustainable in the long term. Companies should regularly review and update their policy to ensure that it continues to meet their needs. Ninthly, companies should consider the legal and ethical implications of their policy in other jurisdictions. If a company operates in multiple states or countries, it may need to have different policies in each jurisdiction. Tenthly, companies should consider the potential for abuse of their policy. If employees are allowed to decide for themselves whether to pull over for funeral processions, some employees may abuse this discretion. Companies should develop strategies to prevent abuse, such as by requiring employees to document their reasons for not pulling over. By considering these factors, companies can develop a policy on pulling over for funeral processions that is both effective and ethical. The policy should be clear, concise, and easy to understand. It should also be consistent with the company's values and culture. When creating a policy, firstly, research state and local laws regarding funeral processions and yielding requirements. Understand specific regulations and potential penalties for non-compliance. Secondly, align the policy with the company's values. If community involvement and respect are core values, emphasize pulling over as a way to demonstrate these values. Thirdly, assess the feasibility of implementation by identifying potential challenges such as traffic conditions, safety concerns, and operational disruptions. Determine necessary exceptions or modifications to the policy. Fourthly, consider different policy approaches. A mandatory approach requires all employees to pull over. An optional approach grants employees discretion. A case-by-case approach considers specific circumstances. Select the most appropriate approach for the company. Fifthly, communicate the policy clearly and effectively by providing training on legal requirements, company values, and practical considerations. Ensure employees understand the policy and its rationale. Sixthly, monitor and enforce the policy consistently. Track compliance and address any violations promptly. Seventhly, review and update the policy periodically to ensure it remains relevant and effective. Consider changes in laws, company culture, and operational factors. Further elaborating on the practical considerations, one must analyze the potential impact on service delivery. For instance, if a service technician is en route to repair a critical piece of equipment, a mandatory pullover policy might cause significant delays, potentially impacting clients and revenue. In such cases, it may be prudent to implement a system where the technician can briefly notify dispatch, explaining the situation and receiving authorization to proceed, ensuring both respect and operational efficiency. Analyzing traffic patterns in areas where employees frequently operate is also important. In densely populated urban areas, pulling over on a busy street could create a safety hazard. Documenting these high traffic zones and providing alternative guidelines, such as expressing respect in a different manner when stopping is unsafe, demonstrates a thoughtful approach to policy implementation. Safety training programs should incorporate modules on navigating funeral processions. Employees should be educated on how to safely and respectfully yield to processions, minimizing the risk of accidents. Emphasizing defensive driving techniques in these situations is critical. Employee input is also vital. Conduct surveys or focus groups to gather feedback on the proposed policy. Employees might offer valuable insights into potential challenges and suggest practical solutions that management may not have considered. Transparency throughout the policy development process is essential for building trust and ensuring buy-in from employees. Providing justification for the policy's specifics and demonstrating how it aligns with the company's values can foster a sense of shared responsibility. Also, assess insurance coverage to ensure it adequately protects the company in the event of an accident involving an employee yielding to a funeral procession. Verify that the policy addresses potential liabilities and outlines procedures for reporting incidents. The policy should also address situations where employees are driving company vehicles versus personal vehicles. Different guidelines might be necessary depending on the vehicle type and usage. The policy should be regularly reviewed by legal counsel to ensure compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. This review should be documented, and any necessary revisions should be implemented promptly. Communication strategies should be multifaceted. Utilize email, newsletters, and team meetings to disseminate the policy. Consider creating a short video explaining the policy and its rationale. Make the policy easily accessible by posting it on the company intranet or in a shared document. Track the effectiveness of the communication efforts. Monitor employee understanding of the policy and address any questions or concerns promptly. Performance evaluations should not be directly tied to compliance with the pullover policy, as this could create unintended pressure and potentially compromise safety. Instead, focus on recognizing employees who consistently demonstrate respect and sensitivity in all aspects of their work. Implement a system for tracking incidents related to the pullover policy. This data can be used to identify areas for improvement and to refine the policy over time. Consider the potential impact on the company's brand image. A well-articulated and consistently enforced pullover policy can enhance the company's reputation as a responsible and compassionate member of the community. Partner with local community organizations to promote awareness of the policy and to encourage respectful behavior towards funeral processions. This demonstrates a genuine commitment to community engagement. The policy should also address situations where employees are unsure whether a procession is a funeral procession. Provide clear guidelines for identifying funeral processions and for erring on the side of caution when in doubt. The policy should be flexible enough to accommodate different cultural and religious traditions. Be mindful of diverse customs and beliefs related to funerals and mourning. The policy should be inclusive and respectful of all individuals.